Be me, Nathan. 30-something, senior dev at a mid-sized software company. It's a good gig, the pay is solid, the work is interesting, and the team is top-notch. We're the guys who build and maintain the company's flagship product. For years, our department was an island of sanity in a sea of corporate nonsense. Our old boss was a no-frills engineer type, cared about two things, clean code and hitting deadlines. He hired based on skill, not buzzwords on a resume. The result was a team that just worked. My buddy Shane, lead back-end guy, is a cynical bastard but a genius with databases. A few other guys, all pros. We had a handful of quiet, competent women on the team too. Nobody cared about anything but the work. Our meetings were short and to the point. No fluff, no drama. We'd bust our asses on a tough release, then the boss would buy us all pizza and beer and let us clock out early on a Friday. It was a meritocracy. You were respected for what you could do. Life was good, too good to last, apparently. One day we get an all-hands email. Our boss got a huge promotion, moving to a different division. We were all happy for him, but a little nervous about who would replace him. The email said the company was thrilled to announce a new leader with a fresh, dynamic perspective. Corporate speak for someone you're going to hate. A week later, we meet her, Deborah. She walks into the conference room, and the vibe shifts immediately. She's got that look. The one that says she knows better than everyone else in the room and she can't wait to prove it. She gives her introductory speech. It's a masterpiece of meaningless corporate jargon, talking about synergizing our forward-thinking paradigms and leveraging our core competencies for impactful change. I looked over at Shane. He was just staring blankly at the wall, like he'd already checked out. Then she got to the real meat of it. She announced her mission was to foster a more inclusive and equitable environment, to challenge the existing power structures and deconstruct the subtle threads of toxic masculinity in our workplace culture. I swear you could feel the oxygen being sucked out of the room. We were a team that worked. We didn't have drama. We didn't have power structures. We had a job to do. The first red flag was small. She wanted to rename our main project servers. The old names were just logical identifiers, like prod-DB-01. She said names like that were uninspired and lacked a human touch. She wanted to name them after inspiring female figures in history. Our sysadmin tried to explain that standardized naming conventions are critical for maintenance and automation scripts. She told him he was demonstrating resistance to change and that his attachment to old systems was part of the problem. So, we spent a whole afternoon in a meeting arguing about server names. We ended up with servers named after obscure poets while our ticket queue piled up. Shane sent me a private message. I've seen this movie before. It doesn't end well. Next came the mandatory weekly culture meetings. Every Thursday for 1 hour, we weren't allowed to work. We had to sit in the conference room and talk about our feelings. Deborah would put up a slide with a topic like unconscious bias or privilege. Then she'd go around the room and ask people to share their experiences. The men on the team, myself included, quickly learned the game. You just say something vague and non-committal. Yeah, it's important to be aware of these things. I'm always trying to learn more. Then you shut up and wait for it to be over. But she would always push. She'd single out the guys. Shane, what are some ways you've benefited from male privilege this week? Shane, who grew up broke and put himself through school, working 2 jobs, just stared at her. He mumbled something like, I guess I was able to open a heavy door. She didn't like that. She said his response was defensive and showed a lack of genuine engagement. It was like being in a re-education camp. The work started to suffer. That 1-hour meeting wasn't just an hour. It killed the whole afternoon's productivity because everyone was so drained and annoyed. Then came the Angela situation. Angela was a junior front-end dev. Pretty new, still learning the ropes. She was okay, but made a lot of basic mistakes. She was also very eager to please Deborah. Whenever Deborah would go on one of her rants about the patriarchy, Angela would nod enthusiastically. A new, important project came up. It was a total rewrite of our user authentication system. Complex, critical stuff. Everyone assumed Shane would lead it. He had the most experience with that part of the codebase. It was a no-brainer. Deborah called a meeting to announce the project lead. She stood at the front of the room, smiling. To break from the old patterns of leadership and provide new opportunities, I've decided to appoint Angela as the lead on this project. The silence was deafening. I looked at Shane. He didn't move a muscle, but his knuckles were white. I looked at Angela. She looked terrified, but also thrilled. Deborah explained that Shane would be a resource for Angela to mentor and support her. In other words, she wanted him to do all the hard work while Angela got the credit and the title. After the meeting, I caught up with Shane in the kitchen. He was just staring into his coffee cup. He said he wasn't going to quit. He said he was going to do exactly what he was told. He would be a resource. If Angela asked him a direct question, he would answer it. He was not going to offer any proactive advice. He was not going to save her when she inevitably drove the project into a ditch. This was the moment the quiet resistance started. It wasn't a coordinated plot. It was just a bunch of guys who were tired of being treated like the enemy. We all made the same unspoken decision. Do your job. Do it exactly as you're told. Don't do an inch more. Don't volunteer for anything. Don't offer suggestions to improve things. Just clock in, write the code you're assigned, and clock out. The atmosphere in the office changed. The easy camaraderie was gone. The lunch table split. The women, especially Angela and a few of her friends, would sit with Deborah. The rest of us, the guys and the other quiet, long-time female employees, would sit at the other end. We'd talk about sports, video games, anything but work. Deborah's meetings got more and more unhinged. She started talking about the emotional labor the women on the team were performing. She said the men needed to be more aware of how their presence affected the women in the room. One day, one of the QA guys, a super quiet dude who never says anything, asked a question about a technical spec in a meeting. Deborah cut him off. "Before you continue," she said, "I want you to pause and consider if a female colleague might have a better insight on this." The guy just blinked. The female colleague in question was a new hire who had no idea what he was even talking about. It was unbelievably condescending to both of them. The hypocrisy was stunning. There was an incident in our team chat. One of the guys posted a meme. It was a pretty tame, nerdy programming joke. Deborah saw it and lost her mind. She called him into her office with HR present. He was given a formal warning for creating a hostile work environment. He had to attend a mandatory sensitivity training course. The next week, during a big departmental presentation, Deborah's own slides were full of cheesy, anti-male memes. One of them was the mansplaining flowchart. Another was a cartoon about male tears. She and Angela were laughing about it. The rest of us just sat there, dead-eyed. The double standard was so blatant it was almost comical. Angela's project, the authentication rewrite, was a slow-motion train wreck. She was in way over her head. Her meetings were a mess. She'd spend half the time talking about her vision for the user experience journey and not enough time on the actual architecture. She would ask Shane questions, but they were the wrong questions. She was focused on the cosmetic stuff, the front end, because that's all she knew. The back end, the actual security and database part of it, was being completely neglected. Shane, true to his word, would answer her questions accurately and then go back to his own work. He didn't warn her that the database schema she'd designed was going to collapse under load. He didn't point out the massive security hole in her login logic. It wasn't his job. He was just a resource. Nathan, myself, I was assigned to a different project, thankfully. I was tasked with maintaining some of our old legacy systems. It was boring, but Deborah left me alone. I kept my head down and wrote my code. I documented everything, every request, every change, every conversation. I had a feeling it would be important later. The overall productivity of the team plummeted. What used to take us a week was now taking a month. Simple bug fixes got lost in a swamp of new bureaucratic processes Deborah had invented. Every code change now required a peer review for inclusivity, which was just Angela looking at it and making sure we didn't use any words she found problematic, like master or slave, in a database context. We had to change our primary code repository from master to main. That broke a ton of our automated scripts and cost us 2 days of work for nothing. Deborah didn't see any of this. In her mind, the team was thriving. She would send out cheerful emails to upper management about the amazing cultural transformation happening in our department. She would praise Angela's innovative leadership on the authentication project. She was building her own narrative, completely detached from reality. The rest of the guys and I would sometimes go for beers after work. We'd vent, we'd complain. We'd try to figure out how long the company would let this go on. The consensus was that as long as she kept management happy with her buzzword-filled reports, nothing would change. We were stuck. One of the older guys on the team, a guy who had been with the company for over a decade, decided he'd had enough. He tried to talk to Deborah privately. He told her, respectfully, that the team's morale was low and that her focus on non-work issues was hurting their ability to deliver. Big mistake. The next day, Deborah called another mandatory meeting. She didn't name him, but she went on a long, passive-aggressive rant about certain individuals who were resistant to progress. She talked about how some people cling to the old ways because they are afraid of a future where their privilege is challenged. It was a public execution. The guy came back to his desk, updated his resume, and put in his 2 weeks' notice a few days later. He was a huge loss. He was one of our best. His departure sent a clear message to the rest of us. Keep your mouth shut or you're next. So we did. We became ghosts in the machine. We'd come to work, put on our headphones, and tune out the world. We'd ignore the passive-aggressive emails from Deborah. We'd sit through her meetings in complete silence. The only interactions were short, technical, and to the point. Our little corner of the office, once filled with collaboration and jokes, was now a dead zone. Deborah, of course, interpreted this as success. She saw a quiet, compliant team. She didn't see a resentful, demotivated one. She thought our silence was agreement. It was actually contempt. We were just biding our time. We knew that a company like this, as obsessed as it was with corporate theater, had processes, and those processes sometimes could be used as a weapon. We didn't know when or how, but we knew a moment would come, a chance to bypass Deborah and speak directly to the people who actually cared about the bottom line. We just had to survive until then. And watch as Angela's project, the crown jewel of Deborah's new regime, continued its spectacular, slow-motion implosion. It was only a matter of time. The weeks bled into one another. The new normal was a low, constant hum of misery. Work wasn't a place for achievement anymore. It was a place for survival. The authentication project lumbered on, a zombie shuffling towards a cliff. Angela looked worse every day. She was working late. You could see the stress etched on her face. She'd started micromanaging every little detail she actually understood, like button colors and font sizes. Meanwhile, the core functionality was a complete mess. She'd come over to Shane's desk looking frazzled and ask him complex architectural questions. Shane would give her precise, technical answers. He was like a malevolent genie, granting her exactly what she asked for, knowing it wasn't what she actually needed. She'd ask, "How do I connect the login form to the user session API?" He'd tell her the exact endpoint and the required parameters. He wouldn't tell her that the API itself was built on a flawed design that was going to leak user data if it wasn't handled perfectly. It was her project. She was the lead. It was her job to know these things. We all saw it happening. We all just watched. It wasn't our problem to solve anymore. We were just resources. Deborah was completely oblivious. She was living in her own world. She'd walk by Angela's desk and say things like, "It's so inspiring to see a woman leading such a complex technical project. You're breaking so many barriers." Angela would just give a weak, tired smile. Deborah started a new initiative, office hours. She would sit in a glass-walled conference room for 2 hours every Tuesday, and people could come in to share their thoughts in a safe space. Nobody ever went. We were all too busy trying to do our actual jobs in the time we had left, after her culture meetings. After a couple of weeks of sitting there alone, she sent out a passive-aggressive email about the team's lack of engagement and how communication is a two-way street. We just deleted it and moved on. The day of the big demo for the authentication project finally arrived. This wasn't just for our team. This was a presentation for the VP of Engineering and a few other department heads. It was Angela's big moment to shine, and by extension, Deborah's big moment to prove her new leadership style was a success. The whole team was packed into the big conference room. Shane and I sat in the back, observing. It was like watching a science experiment. Angela started her presentation. She was visibly nervous. Her slides were all about the journey and the user-centric design philosophy. Lots of buzzwords, very little substance. Then came the live demo. The moment of truth. She brought up the test website on the main screen. It looked nice. The buttons had rounded corners, she said, so I'll now demonstrate the secure and seamless login process. She typed in a test username and password and hit Enter. A loading spinner appeared on the screen, and it just kept spinning. And spinning. Angela's smile started to twitch. She nervously said, "The test environment can be a little slow sometimes." She tried refreshing the page. She tried a different test user. Nothing. The spinner just spun. After a full minute of agonizing silence, one of the VPs cleared his throat. "Is it supposed to be doing that?" Angela was starting to panic. She opened up the browser's developer console. The screen filled with red error messages, database connection timeouts, null pointer exceptions, a complete cascade of failures. Even a non-technical person could see it was a total disaster. Deborah, who had been beaming at the start of the meeting, was now staring at the screen with a look of pure horror. Angela stammered something about a last-minute deployment issue and that it was working yesterday. The classic excuse. The VP just nodded slowly. He said, "Okay, well, let us know when it's ready to show." He stood up and walked out of the room. The other managers followed him. The meeting was over. Angela just stood there, staring at the error-filled screen. She looked like she was about to cry. Deborah was the first to speak. Her voice was cold as ice. "Angela, my office, now." The rest of us filed out of the room in silence. As we walked past Shane's desk, he pointed to his monitor without looking up from his keyboard. He had a server monitoring tool open. The database CPU usage was pegged at 100%. The system was completely choked. Her flawed design had created an infinite loop on the back end. It was literally DDoSing itself. The next morning, Deborah called a post-mortem meeting with our team. Angela wasn't there. Deborah stood at the front of the room and put on a brave face. She said, "Yesterday was a learning experience for all of us. It showed us that we have some gaps in our processes." Then she delivered the killing blow. She never said Angela failed. She was too smart for that. She said, "I think I was perhaps too ambitious in my goals for team leadership development. I may have placed a level of responsibility on certain individuals that they were not yet equipped to handle." She talked about the importance of ensuring team members have the foundational skills necessary before being elevated to leadership roles. She threw Angela under the bus, reversed over her, and then set the bus on fire. She made it sound like Angela was some charity case that she had tried to help, but who ultimately wasn't good enough. She was rewriting history in real time, painting herself as the wise, benevolent leader who was let down by an underperformer. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This was the woman who had appointed Angela over a more qualified senior engineer. This was the woman who had ignored all the technical realities of the project in favor of her own narrative. And now, at the first sign of trouble, she was disavowing all responsibility. It was Angela's fault, not hers. Later that day, I saw Angela at her desk, packing her things into a cardboard box. She wasn't crying, she just looked hollowed out. She had been chewed up and spit out by the very system she had so enthusiastically supported. As she was walking out, she passed by my desk. Our eyes met for a second. She didn't say anything, but I could see it in her eyes. The realization. She finally understood. Deborah wasn't her ally. Deborah wasn't her mentor. Deborah was just a user, and Angela had been a disposable tool. The authentication project was officially put on hold. The code was scrapped. Months of work completely wasted. Deborah tried to spin it as a positive. "We're taking this opportunity to reevaluate our strategic priorities." Nobody was buying it. The atmosphere in the office grew even colder, if that was possible. We all knew what had happened. We all knew who was responsible. And we all knew that any one of us could be the next person thrown under the bus. Deborah became paranoid. She started demanding daily status reports from everyone. She wanted to be copied on every email. She was trying to reassert control, but she had lost the room completely. We complied, of course. We sent our reports. We copied her on emails. It was just more fuel for the fire, more documentation. A week or two passed. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived. It was from the corporate HR department. The subject line was, "Your voice matters. The annual 360-degree feedback survey is now open." I read the first line. "This is your confidential and anonymous opportunity to provide feedback on your peers and management." Confidential, anonymous. My heart didn't leap. It didn't race. It just felt calm. A slow, cold sense of purpose settled over me. This was it. This was the weapon we'd been waiting for. This wasn't about shouting or complaining. This was a corporate process. This was the system she loved to use against us, and now we were going to use it against her. I looked up from my screen, across the aisle of cubicles. Shane was already looking at me. He hadn't opened the email yet. He didn't need to. He knew what it was. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The entire team understood. The silent resistance was over. It was time for the silent execution. That evening, I got home from work. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play any video games. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at my computer, and opened a blank document. I wasn't going to write about my feelings. Emotions were a weakness. Deborah had taught me that. Instead, I was going to give them what they love most. Data. I started making a list. I went through my work calendar, my project management tickets, my old chat logs. I documented every missed deadline since she took over. I calculated the man-hours lost to her mandatory culture meetings. I listed the specific technically flawed directives she had given. I wrote down direct quotes from her meetings, the ones about male tears and challenging privilege. I detailed the incident with the developer who was punished for a meme and contrasted it with her own use of similar content. I described, in neutral, professional language, how she had appointed an unqualified junior to lead a critical project, and how she had publicly blamed that junior for the subsequent failure, deflecting all personal responsibility. I wasn't writing a complaint. I was writing a business case, a case for the removal of a destructive, incompetent manager who was a liability to the company. Every sentence was a nail. By the time I was done, the document was 5 pages long. It was cold, factual, and undeniable. I saved the document, opened the anonymous survey link, and began to copy and paste. The next day at work was strange. The survey link was active for a week, and an invisible clock was now ticking. The air was thick with unspoken alliances. You could see it in the little things. I walked past the desk of another senior engineer, a guy who usually kept to himself. He had a text editor open, and it was full of bullet points. He saw me glance over, and he quickly minimized the window, but not before we made eye contact for a split second. It was a look of complete understanding. Later, in the kitchen, Shane was getting coffee. One of the quiet female QA testers was there, waiting for the microwave. She had been with the company for years, always professional, always on point. Deborah had treated her with constant condescension, explaining basic concepts of her own job to her in meetings. I heard her say quietly to Shane, "Just make sure you include the numbers from the Q3 bug tracking report, the one that shows the 50% increase in critical regressions." Shane just stirred his coffee and said, "Good tip." That was it. That was the entire conversation. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was a spontaneous, decentralized rebellion. Each person, acting alone, was contributing their own piece of the puzzle. We were all building our own case files, using our own areas of expertise. The coders were pulling up metrics on code churn and broken builds. The QA people were highlighting the decline in product stability. The project managers were documenting the missed deadlines and budget overruns. It was a beautiful, terrible mosaic of incompetence, and we were all just describing our little piece of it. Deborah, meanwhile, was blissfully unaware. In fact, she seemed to be in a great mood. She sent out an email encouraging everyone to fill out the 360 survey. She wrote, "Honest feedback is a gift. It's how we grow and challenge ourselves to be better leaders. I look forward to reading your valuable insights." The sheer lack of self-awareness was staggering. She genuinely believed we were going to praise her for her brave leadership. She thought the survey was a tool for her to get a glowing report card to show her bosses. That week crawled by. Everyone submitted their feedback. The digital guillotine was built, sharpened, and hoisted into place. We were just waiting for the rope to be cut. The Monday after the survey closed, nothing happened, or at least nothing visible. Deborah walked in, cheerful as ever. She even brought donuts. They sat in the box in the kitchen, untouched all day. Shane called it the donuts of the condemned. Tuesday was the same, Wednesday too. A sense of doubt started to creep in. What if we were wrong? What if corporate HR didn't care about facts and numbers? What if they just saw a bunch of disgruntled employees and sided with the manager who spouted the right buzzwords? We all started to feel a bit of dread. Maybe we had just painted targets on our backs for nothing. Thursday morning was different. Around 10 a.m., the VP of engineering walked into our department. He wasn't smiling. He was followed by a stern-looking woman from upper-level HR, someone we'd never seen before. They didn't look at any of us. They walked straight to Deborah's office and closed the door. The entire office went dead silent. You couldn't hear a single keyboard click. Everyone was just staring at that closed door, pretending to work. We could hear the low murmur of voices, but couldn't make out any words. The meeting went on for what felt like an eternity. An hour. Then 90 minutes. Shane sent me a message. This is either a promotion or a firing squad. No in between. Finally, after almost 2 hours, the door opened. The VP and the HR woman walked out first. They still didn't look at anyone. Then came Deborah. I will never forget the look on her face. All the smugness, all the arrogance was gone. She looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Her face was pale and slack-jawed. Her eyes were wide and unfocused. It was the look of someone whose entire reality had just been shattered. The look of someone who had been confronted with a cold, hard, data-driven reflection of her own failure, with nowhere to hide. She walked stiffly back to her desk, like a robot. She sat down, stared at her monitor for a full minute without moving, and then she abruptly gathered her purse and her keys and walked out of the office. She didn't say a word to anyone. The moment the main door closed behind her, you could feel this collective, silent sigh of relief wash over the entire department. Nobody cheered, nobody high-fived. It wasn't a moment of loud celebration. It was a moment of quiet, profound justice. We had been heard. The facts had mattered. For the first time in months, there was a sense of hope. An hour later, an email landed in our inboxes from the VP of engineering. The subject was Organizational Update. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. It said that Deborah was transitioning to a new strategic role within the company to leverage her unique talents in organizational development. It thanked her for her contributions and passion in leading our team. Transitioning to a new strategic role was corporate for being fired from your management job and being put in a broom closet with a laptop until you quit. Everyone knew what it meant. She was gone. She was finished. The email went on to say that, effective immediately, our old boss would be returning to lead the department in an interim capacity. That was the part that almost made us cheer. The next day, our old boss, let's call him Dave, walked in. He looked around the dead silent office at the faces of his old team. He gave a small, grim smile. "All right," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I've read the reports. Looks like you've all been through hell." He walked over to the whiteboard where Deborah's schedule of culture meetings was still written. He picked up an eraser and, in one clean motion, wiped the entire thing clean. "First order of business," he said, tossing the eraser back in the tray. "All of that is canceled, permanently. Our job is to build good software, so let's focus on that." It was like a magic spell had been broken. People started talking again. The keyboards started clicking. Someone made a fresh pot of coffee. The cloud of oppressive ideological nonsense that had been hanging over us for months had finally lifted. Life started to return to normal. Dave's first real action was to call Shane into his office. He officially promoted him and put him in charge of fixing the authentication project mess. It was the job he should have had from the start. Justice, based on merit. It felt like a novel concept. A week later, we saw Deborah one last time. She had an appointment with HR to finalize her transition. She had to come back to the office to pack up her personal belongings. It was the middle of the afternoon. She walked in with a cardboard box, trying her best to look dignified. But nobody was fooled. It was the walk of shame. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody even made eye contact. We didn't ignore her out of malice. We ignored her because she had ceased to exist in our world. She was a ghost, a bad memory. She quietly put a few plants and a picture frame in her box. As she was leaving, her box passed by Angela's old desk, which was still empty. I wondered if she felt even a flicker of guilt. Probably not. She walked out the door, and we never saw her again. A few months later, I heard through the grapevine what her new strategic role was. She was tasked with writing internal blog posts about corporate wellness initiatives. From a creative director at the heart of the company's main product to a glorified corporate blogger, her career at this company was over. Her reputation was in ruins. We slowly rebuilt the team. We hired a few new people based on their skills and experience. The productivity of the department shot back up. We started hitting our deadlines again. The camaraderie came back. We started going out for beers after work again. It wasn't exactly like it was before. We had lost a good colleague who quit because of her. We had lost almost a year of progress to her incompetence. We were more cynical now, more wary. We had seen how quickly a good thing could be ruined by one person with a destructive ideology and the power to enforce it. But we had also learned something else. We had learned that if you stay quiet, keep your head down, do your job, and document everything, when the time is right, the truth has a power of its own. You don't have to shout. You don't have to argue. You just have to present the cold, hard facts. Because at the end of the day, a business is a business, and no amount of corporate buzzwords can cover up the red ink on a balance sheet. She came in talking about changing the culture, and in a way she succeeded. She united a team of individuals into a silent, efficient machine. A machine that, when the time came, did exactly what it was designed to do. It identified a critical error in the system, and it removed it.